Hi, grade 4, Miss Whitmore here. Today is your very last kind of video on Tale of Despereaux because we will be finished the book. So it's going to be kind of exciting to hear what happens. I've also read some of your assignments that you've turned in on how you think the book is going to end. So it's going to be interesting to see if any of that comes true as well. Sorry, my computer's gonna die. Yeah, so I'll just get started, and we'll see what happens. We only have 17 pages left to read, so I think I'm just gonna read through the whole thing. All right, so chapter 49 is called What Do You Want, Midgery So? Again, reader, we must go backward before we go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despereaux made his way to them. What happened was this. Rousseau led the pea and Midge deep into the dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Midge to put the princess in chains. "Gore," said Midge. "She's going to have a hard time learning her lesson if she's all chained up like that." "Do as I say," said Rousseau. "Maybe," said Midge, "before I lock her up, her and me could switch outfits so we could start in already with her being me and me being a princess." "Oh yes," said Rousseau, "certainly, a wonderful idea. Miss Midgery. Princess, take off your crown and give it to the serving girl." The pea sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Midge, and Midge put it on and it slid immediately right down her small head and came to rest quite painfully on her poor abused ears. "It's a biggish thing," she said, "and painful like." "Well, well," said Rousseau. "How do I look?" Midge asked, smiling at him. "Ridiculous," he said, "laughable." Midge stood blinking back tears. "You mean I don't look like a princess?" she said to the rat. "I mean," said Rousseau, "you will never look like a princess. No matter how big a crown you put on your tiny head, you look exactly like the fool you are, and always will be. Now make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress-up time is over." Midge sniffed and wiped her eyes and then bent to look at a pile of chains and locks on the floor. "And now, princess," he said, "I'm afraid that the time for your truth has arrived. I will now tell you what your future holds. As you consign me to darkness, so I consign you, too, to a life spent in this dungeon." Midge looked up. "Ain't she going upstairs to be a serving maid?" "No," said Rousseau. "Ain't I going to be a princess, then?" "No," said Rousseau. "But I want to be a princess." "No one," said Rousseau, "cares what you want." As you know, reader, Midgery So had heard this sentiment expressed many times in her short life, but now, in the dungeon, it hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one had ever cared. And perhaps, worst of all, no one would ever care. "I want," cried Midge. "Shh," said the princess. "Shut up," said the rat. "I want," sobbed Midge. "I want. "What do you want, Midge?" the princess said softly. "Oh. What do you want, Midge?" the princess said softly. "Hey?" shouted Midge. "What do you want, Midgery So?" the princess shouted. "Don't ask her that," said Rousseau. "Shut up! Shut up!" But it was too late. The words had been said. The question at last had been asked. The world stopped spinning, and all of the creation held its breath, waiting to hear what it was that Midgery So wanted. "I want," said Midge. "Yes?" shouted the pea. "I want my ma!" cried Midge into the silent waiting world. "I want my ma!" Oh, said the princess. She held out her hand to Midge. Midge took hold of it. I want my mother too, said the princess softly, and she squeezed Midge's hand. Stop it, shouted Rousseau. Chain her up! Chain her up! Gore, said Midge. I ain't going to do it. You can't make me do it. I got the knife, don't I? She took the knife and held it up. If you have any sense at all, said Rousseau, and I heartedly doubt that you do, you will not use that instrument on me. Without me, you will never find your way out of this dungeon, and you will starve to death here, or worse. Gore, said Midge. Then lead us out now, or I will chop you up into little bitty rat pieces. No, said Rousseau. The princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Midge, will stay with her. But I want to go upstairs, said Midge. I'm afraid that we are stuck here, Midge, shouted the princess, unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out. There will be no changes of heart, said Rousseau. None. Gore, said Midge. She lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the servant girl sat together in the dungeon as, outside the castle, the sun rose again and moved through the sky and sank to the earth. Again, and night fell. They sat together until the candle had burned out and another one had to be lit. They sat together in the dungeon. They sat. And reader, truthfully, they might be sitting there still if a mouse had not arrived. Chapter 50, in which the princess says his name. That's the name of the chapter. Princess, shouted Despereaux. Princess, I have come to save you. The Princess P heard her name. She looked up. Despereaux, she whispered, and then she shouted it. Despereaux! Reader, nothing is sweeter in this sad world than the sound of someone you love calling your name. Nothing. For Despereaux the sound was worth everything, his lost tail, his trip to the dungeon, and back out of it and back into it again. He ran toward the princess, but Rousseau, baring his teeth, blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, "Oh no, Rat, please, don't hurt him, he's my friend." Midge said, "Don't worry, princess, I will save the Meesy." She means Mousy, by the way, if you forget. She says Mousy, Meesy. She took the kitchen knife. She aimed to cut it off the rat's head, but she missed her mark. Whoopsie, said Midgeriso. Chapter 51. That was a very short chapter. What is that smell? Ow! Screamed Rousseau. He turned to look at where his tail had been, and as he did, Despereaux drew his needle and placed the sharp tip of it right where the rat's heart should be. "Don't move," said Despereaux. "I will kill you." "Ha ha ha!" Botticelli laughed from the sidelines. "Exactly." He slapped his tail on the floor in approval. "Absolutely delightful. A mouse is going to kill a rat. Oh, all of this is much better than I anticipated. I love it when mice come to the dungeon." "Let me see," said the other rats, pushing and shoving. "Stand back," Botticelli told them, still laughing. "Let the mouse do his work." If you remember from the last time we read, when Botticelli was walking Despereaux to where the princess was, all the mice or the rats were following him too because they wanted to eat Despereaux. Despereaux held the trembling needle against Rousseau's heart. The mouse knew that as a knight it was his duty to protect the princess, but would killing the rat really make the darkness go away? Despereaux bowed his head ever so slightly, and as he did so his whiskers brushed against the rat's nose. Rousseau sniffed. "What is that smell?" he asked. "Mousy blood," shouted one rat. "Blood and bones," shouted another. "You're smelling tears," said Botticelli. "Tears and thwarted love." "Exactly," said Rousseau. "And yet there's something else." He sniffed again. And the smell of soup crashed through his soul like a great wave, bringing with it the memory of light. the chandelier, the music, the laughter, everything. All the things that were not, would never, could never be available to him as a rat. Soup, moaned Rousseau. And he began to cry. Boo! Shouted Botticelli. Sss! Hissed the other rats. Kill me, said Rousseau. He fell down before Despereaux. It will never work. All I wanted was some light. That is why I brought the princess here, really, just for some beauty, some light of my own. Please, shouted Botticelli, do kill him. He is a miserable excuse for a rat. No, Despereaux, said the princess, don't kill him. Despereaux lowered his needle. He turned and looked at the pea. Boo! Shouted Botticelli again. Kill him! Kill him! All this goodness is making me sick. I've lost my appetite. Gore! Shouted Midge, waving her knife. I'll kill him! No, wait, said the princess. Rousseau, she said to the rat. What? He said. Tears were falling out of his eyes and creeping down his whiskers and dripping onto the dungeon floor. And then the princess took a deep breath and put a hand on her heart. I think, reader, that she was feeling the same thing that Despereaux had felt when he was faced with his father begging him for forgiveness. That is, P was aware suddenly of how fragile her heart was, how much darkness was inside it, fighting always with the light. She did not like the rat. She would never like the rat. But she knew what she must do to save her own heart. And so, here are the words that the princess spoke to her enemy. She said, Rousseau, would you like some soup? The rat sniffed. Don't torment me, he said. I promise you, said the princess, that if you lead us out of here, I will get cook to make you some soup, and you can eat it in the banquet hall. Speaking of eating, shouted one of the rats, give us the mousie. Yes, shouted another, hand over the mouse. Who would want him now? Said Botticelli. The flavor of him will be ruined. All that forgiveness and goodness, blech. I, for one, am leaving. Soup in the banquet hall? Rousseau asked the princess. Yes, said the pea. Really. Truly, I promise. Gore, shouted Midge. Soup is illegal. But soup is good, said Despereaux. Yes, said the pea, isn't it? The princess bent down before the mouse. You are my knight, she said to him, with a shining needle. I am so glad that you found me. Let's go upstairs. Let's eat some soup. And reader, they did. Chapter 52. Happily Ever After. But the question you want answered, I know, is did they live happily ever after? Yes, and no. What of Rousseau? Did he live happily ever after? Well, the Princess Pea gave him free access to the upstairs of the castle, and he was allowed to go back and forth from the darkness of the dungeon to the light of the upstairs. But, alas, he never really belonged in either place, the sad fate, I am afraid, of those whose hearts break and then mend in crooked ways. But the rat, in seeking for forgiveness, did manage to shed some light, some small light, some happiness into another life. How? Rousseau, reader, told the princess about the prisoner who had once owned a red tablecloth, and the princess saw to it that the prisoner was released, and Rousseau led the man up out of the dungeon and to his daughter, Midge. Midge, as you might have guessed, did not get to be a princess, but her father, to atone for what he had done, treated her like one for the rest of his days. So if you remember, Gregory the jailer is Midge's dad, and he had sold her to a man that she just called uncle for a red tablecloth, I think some chickens and something else. So now they're back together again. And what of Despereaux? Did he live happily ever after? Well, he did not marry the princess, if that's what you mean by happily ever after. Even in a world as strange as this one, a mouse and a princess cannot marry. But reader, they can be friends, and they were. Together they had many adventures. Those adventures, however, are another story. And this story, I'm afraid, must now draw to a close. But before you leave, reader, imagine this. Imagine an adoring king and a glowing princess, a serving girl with a crown on her head, and a rat with a spoon on his, all gathered around a table in a banquet hall. In the middle of the table there's a great kettle of soup. Sitting in the place of honor next to the princess is a very small mouse with big ears. And peeking out from behind the dusty velvet curtain, looking in amazement at the scene before them, are 4 mice. "Mon Dieu! Look, look!" says Antoinette. "He lives! He lives! And he seems such the happy mouse." "Forgiven," whispers Lester. "Cripes!" says Furlough. "Unbelievable!" "Just so," says the threadmaster. Hovis smiling. "Just so." And reader, it is just so, isn't it? The end. So if you were confused by those characters I just listed off, Antoinette, Lester, Furlough, that's Despereaux' family that sent him off to die in the dungeon, I guess. Yeah, so I guess they're happy to see him doing well at least, which is nice. Yeah, so that's the end of our book. You still do have some questions to answer about what was just read, so please make sure you do that. I also want to suggest to you the movie for this book is actually on YouTube, the whole thing. So if you want to kind of watch the book come to life or compare the book to the movie, because sometimes they change things or they take things out, it's kind of a fun thing to do. So you would just YouTube Tale of Despereaux movie and it's all up there. Yeah. So thanks so much for joining, and it's our last one. Again, if you need any help, just send me an email and I can support you as best as I can. Yeah, thanks so much, guys.